How do you know when to turn off an ad? Is it when it spends $100? Is it when it spends 5 times your AOV? Is it when it just doesn't get a conversion after running for 3 days? How do you know when to turn off an ad? How do you even know when you should scale an ad? Is it just when all of a sudden one day you see a really good CPA and ROAS? Today we're going to be answering this question with statistics using the sample size formula. And it's not very complicated, but this stuff is how people figure out how many people they need to survey in a randomized survey. It's how brands figure out how many people they should be choosing for a particular study. And we're actually going to be using it today to figure out how many people you need to see your ad before you can statistically claim whether something worked or didn't. And really, we're going to figure out the minimum viable sample size in order to determine whether a test you run actually worked. So let's go ahead and get into it. Now, again, this is something you might be using when you're testing a new ad creative, a new offer, a new product, a new audience. And this is really just going to be the number of people you need to see your ad before you can say whether that new offer worked or didn't, whether that new product may have worked in ads, whatever it may be. This is the minimum number of people that need to see your ad before you can make any changes to whatever you are testing, okay? So let's go through how you can actually test this. Now, most ad platforms give you an audience size, right? Meta does. There's ways to find it on Google. X or Twitter does, LinkedIn does, lots of these platforms have it. So just to show you an example here, we can see this estimated audience size is like 300 to 245 million people, right? So we can actually throw that in here, and I just threw in 300 million. And this is the total audience size that our ad could be showing people to, right? Then what we can actually do with this calculator is pick our risk tolerance, right? Because what we're really doing is we're taking a proportion of our sample, right? So we're saying, hey, if this trend applies to a smaller sample of the total audience, we can extrapolate that and say, hey, it probably applies to the audience as a whole. And so that's what we're doing here, is we're really trying to apply this to the audience as a whole. And so with that, it's not going to be precise, it's an estimation. So we have to decide on a margin of error and confidence level. Now, with ads, you have to decide really knowing, the lower margin of error and the higher the confidence, you're going to have to pay for that with more audience members reached, right? So if we have a very low level of confidence, 80%, and we have a pretty high margin of error, we don't need to reach that many people, but we're going to have a very wide margin of error. This trend we see may not apply a lot of the time, right? On the flip side, if we have a very high level of confidence, 99% confidence level at a 1% margin of error, we're going to have to reach a much larger selection of this population. And again, if we have a very small population, say we're doing a retargeting audience with very few people in it, we're going to have to reach a higher percentage of this population to say that the trend applies to the overall audience, right? So these are some of the factors you have to consider. Now, most people, the standard is 95% because it's very confident, and again, confidence level in this example is really what it says. It's how confident you are 95% of the time that this margin of error will occur. And margin of error is plus or minus the percent that you're going to be off by, right? And so really anywhere from 1 to 5% margin of error is good, but we'll just choose 1% and 95%. This is pretty standard. And again, with that 3 million size audience, we can see we need to be reaching around 9,604 people, right? So this is all you have to do. Go to this calculator, input your risk tolerance, and this explains in a lot more detail how this actually works. Put your audience size in, and now you know how many people you need to reach. Now, this is not impressions, right? Because one person can see your ad multiple times, and therefore you can have multiple impressions per ad, but this is actually going to be the number of people you want to see your ad to reach. And so now we know we need at least 9,604 people to see our ad at a minimum before we can say this creative worked or this offer worked or whatever we are doing. So make sure when you're running ads to at least hit this minimum reach sample size before you go ahead and scale something, or before you go ahead and cut something and turn an ad off, okay? So it's very, very simple, and this calculator is very, very easy to use, and it is free in the description below. Now, keep in mind one note with this. On Meta, we have audience segments and audiences within audiences. Because we have such a broad audience, how things actually work is when you're testing a new ad or angle, maybe you sell fitness clothing, for example. So maybe some of your ads will hit maybe an older demographic, and that maybe that's a smaller segment of your overall audience. This is your 300 million. And then maybe you have a bigger demographic within your overall broad audience that is a bigger segment. Maybe this segment here that exists within your overall audience is your key demographic. Maybe millennials, a little bit younger, actually are really, really into fitness. Maybe the older folks just want to wear something comfortable. So when you're running ads, sometimes, depending on the creative, the creative might target a different segment within your total audience, right? So if the creative is talking more to the younger folks, that's going to hit this segment. To the older, maybe it's going to hit this segment, and you may have multiple segments within your total audience. So different offers will appeal to different segments, different creatives, different products. And so when you're doing these sample sizes, keep in mind that meta may shift around your segments, and they will be showing to different populations within your bigger population, which can skew how results look over time. And as you show your ads to an entire population and you switch to a different segment, so if you maybe show your ads to all of the older people within your active brand's total audience, then Meta might switch to this younger demographic, and then your population results might change. So you might see a big change in results all of a sudden because you suddenly have gone through all of these people. So keep in mind that these audiences are dynamic on the platform, and you may see changes over time as segments shift, as they grow, as they shrink, because these audiences on these ad platforms are always moving, okay? So with that side note, go ahead, try this advertising sample size calculator out for yourself so you can now know with a little bit higher level of confidence at a minimum how many people you need to see your ads, all right? Enjoy, and catch you in the next one.